I studied 22 millionaires for 100 hours. Not the ones you see on Instagram, the ones nobody notices, driving used cars, living in the same house for 20 years, quietly worth more than anyone around them suspected. At 40, every single one of them did the same thing. They stopped trying to look wealthy and started doing something most people around them couldn't even see. Here's what that actually looks like. 5 shifts. All of them invisible from the outside, all of them available to you right now. Shift 1. The gap protocol. Not their income, not their job title. The gap. The distance between what they earned and what they spent. That's it. That's the whole game. Ramsey Solutions surveyed over 10,000 millionaires and found that 94% of them consistently lived below their means. Not occasionally. Not when times were tight. Through every raise, through every promotion, through every moment where most people quietly close that gap back down to zero. Here's what usually happens at 40. You've been working 15 or 20 years. You earn significantly more than you did at 25. And somehow, saving feels harder. Not because your actual expenses went up that much, because your lifestyle silently expanded to consume whatever extra space appeared. There's a name for this. Lifestyle inflation, and it's why the Federal Reserve's data shows median household net worth for people aged 45 to 54 sitting at just $168,000. That's not the bottom. That's the middle. Half of people in their peak earning years have less than that saved. The millionaires I studied made a different call at 40. When the raise came, they didn't upgrade the apartment. When the bonus hit, they didn't lease something newer. They kept the gap open. And that gap, that distance between earning and spending, is where wealth actually lives. Marcus spent his career as a mid-level supply chain manager in Ohio. He maxed his 401k every year from 38 onward and drove the same used Honda for 11 years. His co-workers assumed he was struggling. He retired at 57 with $1.4 million. The millionaire next door documented dozens of people who looked exactly like Marcus. They didn't look wealthy. That was the point. Stop. Before we go any further, let that sink in for a second. The median American household in their peak earning years has $168,000. Marcus had $1.4 million. Same career path, same Ohio zip code. The only real difference was one decision made consistently for 20 years. That decision is what we're talking about. Now let's go deeper. Shift 2. Killing the status trap. The typical millionaire drives a 2-year-old or older car. That's not a detail. That's a data point from Ramsey's national study of over 10,000 millionaires, and it tells you something important about how wealth actually accumulates versus how it looks from the outside. A $50,000 car loses roughly $10,000 in value the moment you drive it off the lot. By year 5, it's worth maybe $25,000. You paid $50,000 for something that's now worth $25,000 plus interest if you financed it. The person who bought that same car 2 years old for $38,000 comes out $12,000 ahead before the first oil change. Multiply that decision across every car purchase over a 40-year career. 2 neighbors, both earn $90,000 a year. One buys new every 4 years, lease, trade in, repeat. The other buys 2 years old and drives it for 8. Over 30 years, the second person has an extra $180,000 to $220,000 sitting in investments. Same salary, same neighborhood, different car habit. The millionaires I studied made the car decision at 40. Not because they couldn't afford new, because they understood what they were actually buying. Not transportation, but a number on a depreciation schedule. The car was a tool, not a trophy. Most people at 40 are buying trophies. The millionaires quietly stopped. Shift 3. The circle edit. This is the one nobody puts in the financial planning books, and it has more data behind it than most people expect. Ramsey's study found that millionaires consistently surround themselves with people who support their financial goals. That sounds soft until you understand the mechanism. When your close social circle spends heavily, eats out constantly, upgrades everything on schedule, treats money as something to be consumed as fast as it arrives, the behavioral pull is real. Social spending is contagious in ways that are genuinely hard to override with willpower alone. You don't just pick up habits from the people around you, you absorb their entire relationship with money. Here's the version that actually happened. A guy named Brian worked in commercial real estate in his late 30s. Good income, good career, and a social circle that burned through every dollar that came in. Dinners, weekends away, always something. Brian kept pace for years because that was the environment. At 41, he made a deliberate choice to spend more time with two colleagues who talked about investing, asked questions about index funds, and thought carefully before spending anything significant. Within 3 years, his savings rate had tripled. Not because his income jumped, because his frame of reference changed. The millionaires in these studies didn't cut people off dramatically. They made quiet adjustments. They became more intentional about whose financial behavior they let influence theirs. And that shift compounded just as reliably as any investment. Wait, you might be thinking, this isn't really a financial strategy. This is just common sense. You're right, it is common sense. So is saving 20% of your income. So is buying used cars. So is investing in low-cost index funds. None of this is complicated. The question is, why the median 50-year-old has $168,000 saved while the people who followed these habits have $1.4 million? The answer isn't knowledge, it's environment and consistency. Which brings us to Shift 4. Shift 4, the second engine. By 40, most of the millionaires in Ramsey's study had at least one source of income that wasn't directly tied to showing up somewhere. Not a side hustle in the hustle culture sense, something systematic. A rental property generating monthly income, a dividend portfolio paying quarterly, a small business running without daily involvement, something that produced money while they slept. The Federal Reserve data backs this up clearly. Households with multiple income streams carry median net worths dramatically higher than those relying on a single paycheck, even when the single paycheck household earns more annually. The mechanism is straightforward, but easy to underestimate. A second income stream, generating $1,500 a month, doesn't just add $18,000 a year. It creates a buffer that means you never have to touch your investment portfolio in a bad year. A job loss doesn't trigger a financial emergency. Compound growth keeps compounding without interruption. Carol was a middle school science teacher. At 38, she bought a small duplex on the edge of town. By 40, it was generating $800 a month after expenses. Not life-changing on its own. But combined with her consistent 403(b) contributions, it meant she never had to pause investing. Not once, through 2 recessions, a divorce, and a year of medical bills that would have wiped out most people's savings entirely. 1 income stream is fragile. 2 creates stability. 3 creates options. The millionaires in these studies built their second engine at 40, not 55, not someday. At 40, while the gap was still wide enough for compound growth to do the heavy lifting. Shift 5. The fee assassin. This one is quiet. It's the shift that costs people the most money they never knew they were losing. Ramsey's research found that 80% of millionaires invest through low-cost index funds. The reason isn't philosophical, it's mathematical, and the math is brutal. The difference between a 0.05% expense ratio and a 1% expense ratio sounds like almost nothing. Over 25 years on a $200,000 portfolio, it's roughly $140,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a year of retirement income. That's real money. Destroyed quietly, automatically, every single year, in fees expressed as a percentage so small most people never notice them. Most financial advisors who charge 1% of assets under management will tell you the guidance is worth it. Sometimes it is. What very few of them will tell you is that their fee compounds against you exactly the same way that returns compound for you, invisibly, automatically, for decades. The millionaires in these studies ran that math at 40. They moved to low-cost index funds. They stopped paying for advice they could get from a few good books, and the savings went straight back into the investment account, where they compounded for another 25 years. Here's what ties all 5 of these shifts together. The typical American millionaire hits their first million at 49. That's 9 years after 40. 9 years where the gap stays open, the car sits in the driveway depreciating slowly, the second income stream runs quietly in the background, and the fees stay low enough that compound growth keeps most of what it earns. The people who wait until 55 to make these shifts aren't 9 years behind. They're missing the 9 years between 40 and 49 when compounding does the heaviest lifting of the entire journey. Starting at 25 to reach $1 million by 65 requires $200 a month. Starting at 40 requires $850 a month, same destination, 4 times the monthly commitment. That gap exists entirely because of time, and the decisions made or not made at 40. None of this required a high income. None of it required a lucky break. None of it required anything Marcus or Carol or Brian didn't have access to years before they actually used it. The window is still open. The math still works. The 5 shifts are the same whether you're reading this at 38 or 44 or 51. The only question is whether you use them.